All right, here we go. We're in Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth. The murder has happened. And as I said in the last video, the rest of the play is the consequence of that murder. What happened because Macbeth decided to do that action after the idea, remember, was planted in his head by those witches. Okay? So remember, as Scene 2 was ending, we kept hearing this knocking at the door. Lady Macbeth said they need to go get on their nightgowns. Macbeth expresses remorse for the first time, and now we hear what that knocking was. And the whole point, dramatically, just if you think of the plot, there needs to be time now for Macbeth to go get cleaned up and put on his nightgown. So that's what this whole scene is doing. It also does some interesting kind of cut the tension, something Shakespeare always did, called comic relief. And there are a bunch of jokes in this speech that won't be funny to us, but there's a lot of gags in here that people in Shakespeare's time would have gotten. So the character we meet here is called the porter. A porter is somebody who answers the door and carries people's bags in, okay, if you have a castle and a bunch of servants. So this porter, you can see from his the way his text is written, he's speaking in prose, not in poetry. This is no longer verse. It doesn't have the iambic pentameter meter, but bum, 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 bum. It's just regular writing, okay? That's often used to show that he's less lower class, less educated, that kind of thing. And often these humorous kind of poorer, less educated characters were these kind of funny characters that said all kinds of lewd and kind of risque jokes that people would be cracking up about. So this porter hears a knocking at the door. It's his job to get the door, and he says, "Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were the porter of the hell gate, he should have old turning the key." So what happens next is the porter is going to imagine that he is the porter of the gates of hell, which is an allusion to a biblical, idea of the gates of hell. And so now he's imagining that he is the guarder of the gates of hell, and who's knocking at the door. He says, "Knock, knock, knock. Who's there?" Which I think is the genesis of the knock, knock joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? He says it again over here. So I'm pretty sure, you can double check this, that Shakespeare basically invented the knock knock joke here, or the knock knock joke came out of this speech, which is just kind of neat. Okay. Knock knock, who's there? In the name of Beelzebub. That's like a name for the devil, right? And so he's just imagining who it would be who would be coming to hell. Okay, so his first guess is a farmer that hanged himself, so committed suicide because he expected a lot of crops and didn't get them. Blah, blah, blah. Knock, knock, who's there? Here's an equivocator. This, again, is a reference to a historical thing that happened in Shakespeare's time, which I may give you to read about. If I don't briefly, it's relevant, actually. There was this, if you've ever heard of Guy Fawkes, he was involved in this thing called the Gunpowder Plot, where basically these Catholics were very angry at being persecuted by the Protestant king, King James. And so they had this plot to blow up the king and basically like the whole government by kind of hiding all this gunpowder underneath the government buildings. And that plot it got foiled, didn't work out. But and these people were testifying who equivocated, which means saying kind of this, kind of that. It was seen as like the worst kind of, not quite lying, but even worse. Anyway, doesn't really matter right now. But people would have liked that joke, okay? But this idea that they could swear in both the scales against either scale, that when you equivocate, you're not giving a clear answer. Okay, and then the third guess is about a tailor who keeps stealing stuff and then gets found out. Okay, anyway, he goes on and on. He says, "No, I won't do this. I'll devil porter it no further. I won't pretend to be this porter at the gates of hell anymore." And he opens the door. The primrose way to the everlasting bonfire. That's another biblical allusion, I think. Anyway, the people that come in are named Macduff, and Lennox. It's confusing. There's so many M's. There's Macbeth, there's Macduff, there's Malcolm. But Macduff is going to become a very important character from now on. So you do have to know his name. He shows up with this guy Lennox, who's less important. And the porter says, "I pray you, remember the porter," which might be him asking for a tip. Okay, but look how long it took him to get the door. So Macduff is angry at him and says, "Was it so late, friend, before you went to bed, that you do lie so late?" All right, he's like, "Are you sleeping?" So it must be early in the morning. It's dawn. But the porter in most performances is played as being still kind of drunk from staying up the night before. And then he'll explain why in a little bit. And he goes, "Faith, sir, we were carousing till the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things." So this is about, he's talking about a rooster there. And he's saying, I was up late, okay, like all morning, until the early morning, we were drinking. And he's talking about drinking alcohol provokes three things. What three things does it? And then he's kind of joking here. Nose painting, meaning drinking makes your nose turn red. Sleep and urine. That's what drink causes to happen. And lechery provokes and unprovokes. And then this is all a bunch of kind of sexual jokes about the effects of alcohol, which I'll skip through here, but feel free to read those. And then Macduff is saying, "Man, I think you drank too much last night." And he goes, "Yeah, I probably did." Okay, they get to it. "Is thy master stirring?" Who's his master? This is his master. This is Macbeth's porter. Okay? And so he comes in. Macduff says, "Oh, our knocking woke him up. Here he comes." All right? Lennox says, "Good morning, good morning. Is the king stirring, worthy thane?" Macbeth has to just be cool here and say, "Not yet. Haven't seen him." Right? Macduff says, "He commanded me to call timely on him. I've almost slipped the hour." So the king must have asked Macduff, another thane, to come wake him up early in the morning to go wherever they're going. All right, Macbeth says, again, playing it cool, "I'll bring you to him." All right, "I know this is joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one." He's saying, "I know it's hard to host the king. It's kind of a lot of work." Okay, and Macbeth says, "Oh, it's okay. We delight in it. Here's the door to the room. Again, what's inside?" All right, Macduff goes in to get the king. All right, and so obviously in here, what would Macbeth be doing? He's freaking out because he knows Macduff is about to see the murder scene. Lennox says, "Is the king leaving today?" Macbeth says, "Yeah, he planned to." Okay. Now Lennox talks about the crazy night they had. All of this is symbolic, of course. What happened in the night? It was unruly. Chimneys were blown down. Lamentings heard in the air. Strange screams of death. And prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events. New hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamored the livelong night. There were strange bird calls. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake. All right. There was even earthquakes, weird birds crying out, all kinds of horrible things, people crying out. Look at all Macbeth can say. Yeah, it was a rough night. All right, and Lennox is like, "I can't remember a night like that. It was crazy. There was all kinds of craziness." Now, what's all this meant to represent? I would say that it's this idea of nature responding to Macbeth's unnatural, horrific acts. Killing a king is an unnatural thing to do. And when somebody does something that unnatural, nature itself, the world, the earth, responds and revolts and shakes, and birds cry out, and all this crazy stuff happens. So here is Macbeth's now reaction. All right, he comes out of the room, and Shakespeare always does this when a character is expressing real grief and shock. They don't speak in beautiful poetry or complicated poetry. They use a certain device called repetition. "Oh, horror, horror, horror." That's the only thing he can say. And if you're in total shock, you don't really have many more words than that, right? "Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name me." He's like, I can't even speak or feel what I just saw. Macbeth and Lennox together. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Macbeth says, "Confusion now hath made his masterpiece." Great line. "Most sacrilegious murder hath broken open the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building." Lots of metaphors. Macbeth is like, what are you talking about, the life? Lennox says, "Are you talking about the king? He knew his majesty?" Macduff says, "Go ahead. You approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new gorgon," like Medusa. "Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves." He can't even say it. So Macbeth and Lennox go into the room. And now Macduff, by himself on stage, starts yelling, "Awake, awake, ring the alarm bell. Murder and treason. Banquo, Donalbain, Malcolm, awake. Shake off the downy sleep. Death's counterfeit." Sleep is a counterfeit death, a fake death. "And look upon the real death itself. Up, up, and see. The great doom's image." Great doom is a reference to like the end of the world. That's how it feels to them. This is like the apocalypse. "Malcolm, Banquo, as from your graves, rise up." All this death talk in here. "And walk like sprites to countenance to see this horror. Ring the bell." And then they ring an alarm bell. And here comes Lady Macbeth in her nightgown, right? "What's this business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house?" Why are you waking everybody up with this horrible noise? Speak, speak. Now, what device do you see here again? Oh, gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. Why not? The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. What's he saying? If a woman heard what I have to say, it would just kill you. Because you're women, of course. You can tell my tone now are too weak and soft and good and innocent to be able to handle what I have to tell you about. That is very ironic. Enter Banquo. Oh, Banquo. Now, look, here, Macduff is trying not to tell her. He's really restrained. He's like, I can't even tell you. But then as soon as Banquo comes in, he's like, oh, Banquo, our royal master's murdered. Like, there he has to just tell him. Okay? Lady Macbeth. What? In our house? How, in our house? I mean, she's got to be doing, the actor of Lady Macbeth has to act at acting here, right? Okay? And Banquo's like, well, this would be too cruel anywhere. Dear Duff, nickname for Macduff, please contradict yourself. Say it's not so. Okay. Here comes a super interesting speech of Macbeth's. Tell me if you think he is being, we're supposed to see this as Macbeth full of hypocrisy, all lying, being hypocritical, or if it's sincere. He said, had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. If only I had died an hour before this thing happened, I'd have a blessed life. For from this instant, there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. Interesting metaphors in there too, but see if you can get the gist of it. What do you think? Are you supposed to think like, ugh, that fake guy, he's talking as if he's so sad, but he's the one who just killed the king? Or is this real? Okay. What is amiss? Here come Malcolm and Donalbain. Poor Duncan's two kids. Okay. What's wrong? And Macbeth says, you are and don't even know it yet. Does he actually feel bad for him? Why is he talking to him like this? The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. The fountain of your blood, where you came from. Okay? Then Macduff is more plain with him, which maybe is more kind. Your royal father's murdered. Oh, by whom? Lennox says, those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood, so were their daggers, which unwiped we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them. Okay, so that plan seems to be working. They look like the guards are guilty. What happens here? Macbeth says, oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them. What just happened? Was that part of the plan? No, Macbeth was not supposed to kill the guards, but he did. Here, we get Macduff. This may be the first time of several others where we see him kind of challenging Macbeth. Remember what wherefore means? It means why. Why did you do that? You killed the guards? Why'd you do that? Okay? Look at Macbeth's response now. This language, I'll give you what I think of up here. Up here, I think he's being pretty sincere. We know that he regrets it already. He said so at the end of the last scene. I wish the knocking could wake Duncan up. So I feel like he really is saying, I wish I had died before this because now my life is cursed. Now here, he doesn't seem quite as sincere. Here he seems, his tone is a little bit like pompous, like, oh, I'm the best, you know? And this makes him seem really hypocritical. Who can be wise and amazed and temperate, calm and furious, loyal, neutral in one moment? No man. You know, this was all about my violent love who outrun reason. I couldn't be reasonable here. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gash stab looked like a breach in nature. For ruined, wasteful entrance there, the murderers steeped in the colors of their trade, covered in red blood, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. They're breached means like wearing pants, but like the daggers are wearing unmannerly, meaning inappropriate clothing for them, which was the gore of Duncan. Who could refrain that had a heart to love and in that heart courage to make loves known? So he just keeps going on and on and on and on and on about, in this like high poetry language, about how, of course, he killed the guards. Then look what happens. Lady Macbeth says, help me, hence ho, look to the lady. So here is what happens to Lady Macbeth. She faints. That's what this is. She faints. two possible things going on here. Okay, one, by hearing this description of the gory scene in the room where she was, remember when she put the daggers back and it probably affected her, okay? She can't handle that, and so she faints. She's physically weak, all these things, okay? Or what else? Some people say that she fakes this right now, that she is faking fainting because Macbeth is kind of talking too much here and being weird. So maybe to make him shut up, she faints right here. Those are helpful notes. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So you can decide. You'll see in films it's shown in different ways. Anyway, Malcolm then says, aside to Donalbain, why do we, remember, these are the two sons, okay? Why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for hours? He's realizing they might look suspicious because they might have wanted to kill their father to become more powerful, okay? And he's like, we're not saying anything. What should we do? Donalbain says, what should be spoken here where our fate hid in an auger hole may rush and seize us? Let's away. Okay, he's like, it's too dangerous right here. Anything could happen to us. Let's get out of here. Our tears are not yet brewed. Like you have to brew tea. He's explaining like they're not feeling grief yet because they're still in shock. Okay. And then we get, so someone helps Lady Macbeth to leave. And Banquo says, when we have our naked frailties hid, okay, they're still in their dressing clothes that suffer an exposure. Let's meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. So he's vowing to kind of figure out what happened here. And not let this continue. Okay, Macduff says, so do I. So all, okay, Macbeth says, let's get ready. We'll meet in the hall together. Okay. Then they all leave to get dressed, and Malcolm says, what will you do? He's talking to his brother Donalbain. Let's not consort with them. Why not? Okay, one reason here. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. They're not feeling sorrow yet because it's still too fresh and they're freaked out. And if they faked it, they would look like they were being liars, and then that would bring more suspicion on them. So Malcolm decides to go to England. Remember, they're in Scotland. Okay, to just leave. Donalbain says he'll go to Ireland. Now, this is going to end up being really good for Macbeth because what's the consequence, you think, if after Duncan's murder, Malcolm just bouncing and running away to England and Donalbain going to Ireland? Yeah, that's going to put more suspicion on Malcolm and Donalbain as being the ones who orchestrated the murder. So it's good for Macbeth. Why are they doing this, though? Donalbain says, our separated fortune shall keep us both safer. Why? And here's a key line. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. What does that mean? The near in blood, the nearer bloody. To be near in blood means to be close in blood relation. Who's the closest relation to the king and Malcolm and Donalbain? It's actually Macbeth. He's the cousin. So you could read this as them already suspecting him. There's daggers in men's smiles. Who smiled at them when they welcomed them into the castle? It was Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. This murderous shaft that shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. Yeah, he thinks that this plot is not over yet. So he thinks they might be next is the other reason. He's like, yeah, also, whoever killed our dad is probably going to kill us next. Possible. Okay, so our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore, to horse, let's go. And not be dainty of leave-taking, but shift away. There's warrant in that left which steals itself when there's no mercy left. And then they go. Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to stop this one there. Everybody's with it. Hopefully things are making more sense. I'll see you later.